Welcome into a brand new episode of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast. Alex Barth with you from 98.5, 98.5thesportshub.com. Getting ready to take a look at the Patriots Week 4 matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. To help us out, we have Markus Boucher from KNBR Radio in San Francisco to get us kind of familiar with what's going on with the Niners, because I feel like there's a lot of moving pieces there. Before we get to that, though, Markus, speaking of moving pieces, I know you were at the Coliseum last night for the A's last ever home game. I can't even fathom what it would be like to straight up lose your team, your hometown team. That must have been a surreal environment. I have to ask you about that. I find this whole thing fascinating.
Yeah, first of all, Alex, good morning. Thanks for having me on today. And yeah, it's pretty surreal, but the fact that it's now happened 3 times in the last 6 years to the city of Oakland. Yeah. Whether we're talking about the Raiders going to Vegas, the Warriors moved across the bay to San Francisco, but it still feels a little different that they're not in Oakland. And yes, yesterday, the last game at the Oakland Coliseum, they turned off the lights, pulled the plug on a stadium that's essentially been on life support over the last couple of years. It was a surreal feeling. It was like kind of going to a funeral where everybody was just kind of waiting for someone to die. They pulled the plug, and yesterday was the last game at the Coliseum.
Wow. Well, I feel for you guys, because that, and it had been a few years, but when that thing got going there for the A's, a great fan base. The Niners, though, clearly aren't going anywhere. I would say probably the best team in the Bay right now, right? Even with the Warriors still sort of doing their thing, but it's not going to be the full-fledged Niners we see against the Patriots this week. They've got some players who we know are out, some guys who are questions going into this game. Now, we're recording this for us here in Boston at about 3 o'clock on Friday. So before we get that final injury report, but what are you hearing? What's the expectation? And even some of these guys who are maybe borderline like Deebo Samuel, what is the expectation for them if they do play?
So we had John Lynch on our morning show this Friday and gave us some pretty vague answers on the status of the guys this weekend. But Deebo Samuel and George Kittle have both been back at practice. And George Kittle spoke to the media yesterday, said he's feeling fantastic and looking forward to playing football again. So I'd expect to see George Kittle out there this weekend, which is going to be a huge benefit to the overall offense for the 49ers through the receiving game and in the run game with how good of a blocker that he is. Now, Deebo Samuel is a different situation. Most people were expecting Deebo to be held out at least one more week. But John Lynch said yesterday at practice, he was looking good. He's a fast healer in his own words. So there's a chance that Deebo could be out there this weekend. But we saw last week, Brock Purdy without Deebo Samuel, without George Kittle, without the big weapons, without Christian McCaffrey, who just got back from Germany to get his Achilles checked out, that Brock Purdy was able to run this offense. The real big problem with the 49ers right now is their defense, and plenty of injuries on that side also. But when you're looking at this 49er offense, I would expect to see George Kittle out there this weekend, still questionable on Deebo Samuel.
So I want to get to the defense, but just real quick on the offense. First off, Brock Purdy, he's been a full participant, but he's dealing with an injury. Is that anything you expect to impact the team? And then, I think Patriots fans and fans around the league who don't watch the Niners every week, they know McCaffrey, they know Deebo, they know Kittle, they know all the guys who are on the injury report, right? And Aiyuk isn't on there. He's the other big name, but saw Javon Jennings step up last week. Who are some other guys the Patriots fans should be aware of that Brock Purdy's turning to with some of these absences?
Well, the number one guy is Jordan Mason, a.k.a. JP, as we call him out here in the Bay Area. This is a guy that has not missed a stride in the running game with the 49ers. And we know Kyle Shanahan, going back to the days of Mike Shanahan, they want to establish the run. And they've been able to replace the production of Christian McCaffrey in the run game. But where they're really missing him is on third down out of the backfield because he's an absolute nightmare matchup. So they've tried to do a couple of tricks, put Deebo Samuel in the backfield, but that led to Deebo also getting hurt after that week 2 matchup. They'll try to mix in a little bit of Christian Juszczyk, but really it comes back to setting up the run, setting up the play action, and then getting George Kittle over the middle. You mentioned Brandon Aiyuk. That's a guy that we're posting on milk cartons out here in the Bay Area because he just hasn't showed up this entire season. I don't know if it's going to be a breakout game from BA, but it all starts with the run game. So Jordan Mason is definitely a name that you guys need to know out there on the East Coast.
What's been going on with Aiyuk? I know, just again, what I've caught of the Niners and studying them a little bit this week, drops seem to be an issue for him, but does it run deeper than that? And the Patriots have a guy in Christian Gonzalez that, he's been very competitive against Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase to start the season, going back last year, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. Is that somewhere where maybe the Patriots have an advantage with how Aiyuk is playing right now?
I would say right now, because it just doesn't feel like Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk have the same chemistry that they had last year. We'd always joke around about playground Purdy and backyard Brock and whether or not BA was downfield hanging out on the swing set, ready to go and catch this big play. And there was a play last week where Brandon Aiyuk called a hot route on one of his own routes, got open over the field, but Brock Purdy did not see him. And I feel like that goes back to chemistry. It goes back to Brandon Aiyuk skipping the entire training camp. He showed up. I don't want to make it too big of a deal, but it does look like he's a little bit out of shape. I don't know where the speed's at. I don't know where the conditioning level is at. And that's why we just haven't seen that production yet from Brandon Aiyuk. And the chemistry obviously is not there right now between him and Brock Purdy.
How is that situation viewed in San Francisco? I mean, I'm just curious because we obviously followed that here very closely in New England throughout the summer. And I won't lie, there was about a 10-hour stretch there where I thought Brandon Aiyuk was going to be a Patriot. I was getting the post ready for the website and everything, but obviously he's back in San Francisco now and struggling. Is there maybe regret in how that was handled in San Francisco?
Yeah, there's definitely some frustration with Brandon Aiyuk, especially when he does get the big payday. Gets $30 million. You look at the other $30 million wide receivers in the league, and I believe there's 5 other wide receivers, whether we're talking Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill. You guys know the list of these wide receivers. And these are guys that are getting 10 to 12 targets per game. First 2 weeks of the season, Brandon Aiyuk, 5 targets per game, only about 4 catches, 40 yards each in those matchups. Now, last week, Kyle Shanahan did try to force feed the ball to Brandon Aiyuk a little bit early in the game, had a big third down drop, and Brock Purdy just showed more confidence and more chemistry with a guy like Jawan Jennings. So there's definitely some frustration. I know there was a viral video going around on Twitter of 49er fans burning a Brandon Aiyuk jersey. I don't know if I'm at that point yet with Brandon Aiyuk, but there's definitely some frustration when week in and week out and every single day on our morning show, we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk going to get traded to the Patriots. Brandon Aiyuk going to get traded to the Steelers. At some point, 49er fans were saying, damn, just get the trade over with so I can move on with my life. But yeah, 49ers actually got lucky in that situation. And I think fans should be grateful that they still have BA, especially when you're looking at the injuries of Debo, Kittle, and of course, Christian McCaffrey.
Do you think there's anything to, I forget if it was late last week or this week, he said something along the lines of he's seeing different coverage this year than he has in the past. And that's going to happen when half the offense is out, right? Yep. Suddenly teams are able to put more attention on him. Do you put any credence to that, or is that maybe just a player that's struggling looking for a reason?
I do think there is some value to what he's saying there. And there actually are numbers in his separation routes and the new analytic that everybody's obsessed with. And he has been getting open more often weeks 2 and week 3. But he showed up after week 1 after holding out the entire preseason and said, yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed to go watch that game tape on Monday morning. Like, bro, you can't be out here embarrassed to watch the game tape when you just got $30 million. So that was the big issue. And to his point, last week against the Rams, we saw a lot of 3-man pass rush, which means there's 8 guys dropping back, trying to make more confusion for Brock Purdy. And look, defensive coordinators around the league are trying to find out a way to beat Brock Purdy and beat this Shanahan system. Brian Flores has done a pretty damn good job. He's beat Brock Purdy now twice in the regular season, and we saw some of that same strategy used last weekend by Sean McVay in the LA Rams. So they're going to try to make it more complicated, and when there's 8 guys dropping back, it's obviously going to be harder to get open, but still, 49er fans are at the point where there's no excuses with BA. You got to make the plays, and you can't be dropping third down passes or touchdown passes like we saw week 1 against the Jets.
So big picture from Flores, what did you see? Because this is a staff in New England, even though Bill Belichick's no longer here, Gerard Mayo, DeMarcus Covington, guys who were here with Flores, and it's still that same basic defensive system. You'd think there'd be some carryover. What did the Vikings do last week that gave the Niners trouble?
I think it all goes down to Brian Flores being able to disguise the blitz packages. And a lot of the time, he was getting pressure up the middle. Now, Brock Purdy is not the tallest quarterback. And on the interior of the 49ers offensive line, that is one of their weaknesses, in my opinion. You can Twitter and just Google the name of Jake Brendel and see him getting beat on pass rush situations left and right. So if you're going to get pressure on Brock Purdy, the best way to do it is up the middle. So there were stunts from Van Ginkel getting pressure from the inside. And to be completely honest with you, Alex, outside of Trent Williams, I don't have a lot of confidence in this 49er offensive line. Dominic Pooney at right guard, rookie, has shown some flashes, but you look at right tackle, Colton McKivitz, that's a guy that's on a turnstile each and every week getting beat by pass rushers. So I wouldn't be surprised if Keon White or anybody else on that defensive line could have some success getting to Brock Purdy this weekend. They just got to make sure to get there quick.
You mentioned before the Niners defense has taken some injury hits. The big one this week, Javon Hargrave out at
Yes.
least for an extended period of time, if not the year. And that's going to be a big blow to this Niners run defense. And the Patriots, they want to run the football. They want to run it early. They want to run it often. Once you think they're done running it, they're going to run it some more. Struggled to do so last week against the Jets. How big of a blow is Hargrave? And is this Niners defense one that the Patriots can run on?
Look, it's a big blow losing Hargrave, no doubt about it. But Hargrave was also on this defensive line last year when they were getting gashed by the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. So the 49ers this offseason revamped totally with that defensive line. Hargrave's still there. Bosa's still there. You look at Leonard Floyd on the outside, who's more of a pass rush specialist. They're bringing in a guy like your Gross Matos, who can slide inside and play defensive tackle in third down pass rush situations. But replacing Hargrave's going to be tough, especially when they're looking at a guy like Jordan Elliott, who just got carted off the field at practice for the 49ers on Thursday down in Santa Clara. So they're missing another body there. We talked to John Lynch on the show, as I mentioned earlier. They're going to put Hargrave on the IR, maybe call up a guy like T.Y. McGill, who you see out there this weekend. But definitely, it's a big, big red flag because the 49ers defensive line wasn't that great last year, especially when it came to stopping the run.
Then there's the Nick Bosa of it all. And you mentioned not trusting the 49ers offensive line. The Patriots come in. They're the worst pass blocking offensive line in football through 3 weeks. And you look at a guy like Bosa, who offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt this week said it's a nightmare to game plan for this guy. And I know that his usage has kind of changed a little bit this year. What's different about, let me just start here, I guess. What's different about how they're using Bosa this year from maybe past years?
So the big difference with Bosa so far, he did have a 2-sack performance against Sam Darnold and the Vikings, and he is getting pressure on the quarterback. But this is something that 49er fans have kind of been getting frustrated with Nick Bosa over the last 2 seasons, because last year after his holdout, he also told the media that it took 5-6 weeks just to get his legs back underneath him until we saw the classic vintage Bosa. But it feels like we haven't seen that same Nick Bosa that we saw the year that he won Defensive Player of the Year. And he might still be getting pressure, but they're not getting pressure on third down, Alex. And that's the big thing. I talked about their third down offense. Their third down defense is arguably worse. Third down conversions are ranked 30th in the NFL. So they're not getting the big time sacks when they need it. And a lot of times it's so bad on third down, it's because they're getting ran on. I talked about the interior of that line and what it's going to look like without Hargrave. The dirty little secret about Nick Bosa is you can run because he's not great at setting the edge. If there's any weakness in Nick Bosa's game, it's running the ball straight at him, getting to the edge and getting to the outside. So if I'm the New England Patriots, that's what I'm looking to do this weekend.
Well, there's that element of it, but also, and I know they move him around kind of side to side. The Patriots will be, or look to be, we don't know for sure. We'll see again the injury report, but there's a good chance DeMontre Jacobs starts at left tackle. You go back to camp, I mean, he's not even the 4th string left tackle because he was claimed during waiver pickups. He wasn't here, but Chuks Okorafor was the guy they started the season with. He's no longer with the team. Vidarian Lowe got hurt. Caden Wallace, the rookie, got hurt last week. He may not be ready to go. 4th string left tackle. Do you still expect them to move Nick Bosa around, or is that a matchup you think they'll just try to take advantage of as much as possible?
I would expect to try to take advantage of that matchup, but Nick Sorensen, who was taking over as the defensive coordinator this year, just really hasn't gotten that creative with his schemes, with his blitz packages. So now you're saying that. I mean, that should be on the grease board for the 49ers right now. And I would just say maybe get Drake May ready in that situation if it's going to be Jacoby Brissett back there with a 4th-string left tackle.
Well, look, there's been a lot of talk about Drake May here, and obviously we saw him a little bit last week, but some of and we don't know for sure. You know, we've kind of heard different messages from the coaching staff, but I'm of the belief that the offensive line is part of the reason we're not seeing Drake May right now. Because look, eventually the kid's going to have to learn to take pressure and take a hit, but it's just so excessive at this point. I think last week against the Jets, who have a good front, but the Niners do too, they were over 50% pressure rate. I mean, it was just not, it wasn't operational. So they didn't really have a chance to throw the ball. Maybe it's the same thing this week against the Niners. It's very possible. When they do throw the ball, though, you mentioned this system. Where can the Niners in the secondary and coverage be had in the passing game?
It's been the deep ball that's been burning them all year long. And I think that does relate to the pass rush not getting home. You look at a guy like Matthew Stafford, who traditionally gets the ball out of his hands in less than 2 seconds. But last week, he was dropping back and sending shots down the field, whether we're talking about the play to Tutu Atwell or the week before with Sam Darnold connected with Justin Jefferson on a 97-yard touchdown. I think their safeties and their DBs are beatable, especially when you are looking at strong safety and free safety. Talanoa Hufanga made his return last week. First game back since tearing his ACL. He was a second-team All-Pro safety. He's a great in-the-box safety. Their only problem is their other safety, Jair Brown, is also a strong safety who plays in the box. So they really don't have that center fielder in the back of their defense that can protect them on those deep bombs. So if he can get some protection for the quarterback, I would expect shots to be taken, because it seems like in this copycat league, a lot of teams are now taking that strategy against this 49er defense.
Big picture, this is a team that came off a tough loss last week, blew a multi-score lead late in that game, and this has kind of become a habit for the 49ers. And when we met at Army Navy, we talked a little bit about Kyle Shanahan. People in Boston know how I feel about him. And look, it's not the Rams aren't the Chiefs. It wasn't the Super Bowl, but I know Bosa was vocally frustrated with the way that game went. Is this something that is motivation, or is this a team now kind of asking itself, what are we missing here that this keeps happening?
I think last week was a bit of a reality check, because that's a game the 49ers should have won. They were up 14 points against a Rams team that didn't have Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. But for some reason, they just were not able to put the game away, which, to your point, has been a common theme with Kyle Shanahan. This past weekend was the 5th time that he's blown a 10-point lead just with the 49ers. We don't even got to go back to the 28-3 Super Bowl game. You know all about that. Trust me, I don't got to inform you on that. So that's been the biggest issue. And it's a narrative that is going to surround Kyle Shanahan until he wins the big game. It's a comparison I make a lot with a guy like Andy Reid, who got ran out of town in Philadelphia for some of that same criticism. Can't manage the clock in the fourth quarter. Great offensive mind, brilliant. Can draw plays to get guys open, but it comes down to actually coaching instead of just scheming. And so far, Kyle Shanahan has not proved a coach in the fourth quarter, which is why we're sitting here talking about all these fourth quarter collapses.
So let me ask you this, like my thing, and I've kind of said this tongue-in-cheek, because even with the injuries, there's still a skill gap. But I've kind of been tongue-in-cheek, like, if the Patriots are within 10 in the fourth quarter, you feel pretty good about it. Is the Patriots aren't the Rams, right? But is that something where every time it's kind of a close game late, you're holding your breath?
It's a thought, and you're right, not to take any shots at you guys, but Jacoby Brissett is not Matthew Stafford. And
that's why, again, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. But I mean, I remember when the Patriots were the Patriots, like we're elite, and Belichick and Brady, there were still things that you sort of tracked that you knew. One of them was interior pressures. Like, no matter who they were playing, if Brady was getting hit up the middle, even if it was a few times early in the game, you just kind of knew, like, all right, here we go. It's going to be one of those days. They could be playing a bad Jets team, and it was just this thing that we all knew. And I just wonder if the Shanahan late game stuff has reached that level in San Francisco.
I mean, there is a panic level with a small fraction of fans, I should say. And every fan base has these fans who are calling for the coach's head just because they didn't win the Super Bowl. Look, find me a guy who can replace Kyle Shanahan, and I'll say, come on down. There's not too many coaches who can do what Kyle Shanahan can do, but it has reached a point where it definitely is a talking point, and everybody has Super Bowl expectations. And I got to say, playing against a team like the New England Patriots this weekend, you knew what the over-under win total was for your guys' squad this year. Nobody's looking at you guys as Super Bowl contenders. Sorry to break the news to you guys, but if you guys are within 10 points in the fourth quarter, that means you're covering the spread. It's a 10.5-point spread, and it's been a wacky NFL season where we've seen teams like the Patriots, week 1, upset the Bengals. I mean, I think it's the first time in over 70 years that the biggest underdog of the week has outright won. Whether it's the Patriots week 1 against the Bengals, it was the Raiders against the Ravens, and the Commanders on Monday night against the Bengals as more than a touchdown favorite. So in this league right now, anything can happen any given Sunday.
So I'll close on this. I've asked you a lot of questions about the Niners, just trying to get to know them. And look, I know the spot you're in again when the Patriots were on their run. Bad loss against a division opponent. You know, you're playing a team that was picking in the top 5 of the draft next week. You're not getting too much into that matchup. So I don't know how much Patriots talk you've done, but I'm just kind of curious from the outside looking in, right? As you guys look at this Niners-Patriots game, what is the big talking point around the Patriots as an opponent?
I think it's, can they stop the run? Because we know that you guys want to line up and run the rock with Ramondre Stevenson, and we just got done talking about that defensive line. But I also think there's a big mismatch here for you guys with Antonio Gibson out of the backfield. You can pick on Devondre Campbell. Now, Fred Warner, all-pro Fred, as we like to call him out in the Bay Area, is arguably the best linebacker in football. But we saw last week, Kyron Williams was exposing Devondre Campbell. So that's a matchup that you guys could take advantage of out of the backfield. I think that's one of the big talking points is how you slow down both Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson in the run game and in the pass game.
So last week they had I know Warner kind of is a rover, but he was more on tight end responsibilities. Do you think if the Patriots start throwing the ball to the backs, and weeks 1 and 2 they did, Ramondre Stevenson had more touches than anyone in the league through the first 2 weeks. Do you think there's a chance they switch it and maybe Campbell could end up on a guy like Hunter Henry?
You know, to be honest with you, Alex, they should probably just switch Devondre Campbell off the field. But the issue is they look at a guy like D. Winters, who is going to get more playing time this week. He's dealing with an ankle injury, so he might not be able to go full amount of snaps this weekend. You look at a guy like Curtis Robinson, another guy that a lot of 49er fans are calling for. He was also carted off the field in practice earlier this week, so they just don't have the depth. They don't have the bodies. I like what you're saying with Fred Warner, but going up against a guy like Hunter Henry, I don't think you want that matchup versus Devondre Campbell also.
He is Markus Boucher. You can catch him on KNBR out in San Francisco. Markus, thanks for joining us. Thanks for getting us caught up on the Niners.
Alex, it was a blast, man. Thanks for having me on.